I am now recording. Uh, Dick DeBartolo, thank you so much for joining. I'm a huge fan. I'm gonna geek out. I grew up subscribing to Mad. I had your books, Good Times in Mad. I know all that stuff. To people who might not know Mad Magazine, I'm sure everyone knows. You were sort of one of the founding pillars. You were there from the earliest of days, I believe 1966. You came on board, and you really, when people think of Mad Magazine, a lot of what they're thinking of is what you created. The movie satires, the humor, the style, the zaniness, and I mean, looking at your background, it's I think you're synonymous with the magazine.
Well, the funny thing is, when I first started at Mad, I did what's called the Philipp Pieces, and that was just 1 and 2 pages that would go between the big satires, the Mad movies or the Mad TV shows. And then I wrote some material, stand-up material for 2 guys who had just gotten out of the Air Force, and one of them liked it, a guy named John Biner, who's still around, and the other hated it. Anyway, I went to Nick Meglin and I said, Nick, I'm so depressed. I wrote this thing about 2 guys in the Air Force, and Nick Reddy said, "Oh, this should be a movie in Mad." I said, "Well, it's not something that people see on the screen." He said, "No, people just make it a generic war movie." And I did that, and people seemed to like it. So then I did a generic submarine movie. And then after 3 or 4 of those, they said, you should be doing movies along with um, Stan Hart and Arnie Kogan. And so I started doing the movies, and it was great fun. It was great fun. And to brag, I ran into Roger Ebert at a press event, and I said, Roger, we kind of do a little bit of the same thing. He said, how's that? I said, because like I review movies by trashing them in Mad. And he goes, what's your name? I said, Dick DeBartolo. He said, you helped me become a movie reviewer because I loved Mad and I loved the movie reviews. And I thought, I can't be satirical, but I can review them. And he said, let me shake your hand because you helped me get started in this career. So it's kind of fun that even though Mad now is just repeats, that people remember.
Yeah, it's I mean it repeats, but you sort of set off this ripple effect where you mentioned you created, just a satire of a war movie or a submarine movie. And then what happened? We got actual movies, we got Airplane, we get Scary Movie, we get movies that are pretty much, mimicking in the real world what you were doing on the page. When you saw that start coming out, did you sort of take a little pride that you kicked it off, that you were part of the sort of the inspiration, sort of this
Well,
proto punk
the
figure?
Mad had been doing movies for some time. I was just proud to be part of that because
Mhm.
let's see, Mad came out in 52, I think, and I joined. I think my first satire was in 62. So I was reading Mad, but I kept saying, I'm reading this, but I want to be writing this. Um, and and if you and so I bought a book called The Writer's Yearbook, which told you how to submit to magazines. And it was joined at the back. It said magazines that will accept material without an agent. I didn't even know that some magazines will only read a manuscript if it's submitted to them with an agent. And so I submitted something to Mad, and they said put in a self-addressed stamped envelope because if it's rejected, they'll throw it away unless they can mail it back to you. And my own envelope came back, and very depressed. And I opened the envelope, and it was stuffed with cardboard, and it said, "Ha ha! Thought your script got rejected. stapled to this card, but it's a check for $100. $100 was a big deal back then. And please call us. We want you to do more stuff.
It
So that got me started.
yeah, I mean, the story, it feels like Mad Magazine was this icon, but it was reachable. Like, you can submit jokes, you can submit stuff, you can submit material. Where now it feels, where is the opportunity for just a kid, sitting in an apartment, reading this material or looking at stuff on TV to
Yes.
sort of try to get in.
The only advantage the kid has is he could put it on his own website. I mean, maybe there'd be a stroke of luck and it would get some traction, but it just seems that there's an awful lot of terrible stuff on the web. Uh, Sometimes I think, did did they even bother looking at this video because I don't see the top of the people's heads? And I think there's just there's just too much out there, but that's the way the internet is. It's just anybody can do anything.
When you were parodying movies, uh, was there a difference whether you liked the movie or didn't like the movie? What was sort of an approach you had, or when
That's
you're trying to write jokes, when you're trying
yeah,
to
yeah, no, no,
entertain?
that
How do you approach it differently if you like it or don't like it, or if you
yes,
don't
yes.
understand the movie?
The more I hate the movie, the more I want to do it. The more I feel like I thought Brokeback Mountain was a wonderful movie. Being a gay man, I thought it was a wonderful movie. Um, and John Ficarra said, "Do you want to do this session?" I said, I I'd rather pass on this. I don't want to break down anything about this movie. Now, Arnie Kogan did the takeoff, and the takeoff is very funny. Bare Butt Mountain is what he called it, and the jokes are very funny. The guy goes quote on a tells his wife it's a fishing trip, and he's actually going out so he can be with his male lover. And when he comes back from the fishing trip, the wife says, "Did you catch anything?" And he said, "Dear God, I hope not." So he was able to do a satire in the movie without putting the movie down. It was just I thought he did a great job. Yes, but if it had authority, Nick Megalin said this is how we assign movies. If it's about married couples, Stan Hart or Larry Siegel, they're both married, they both know about married life. He said, "You love gadgets. If it's a tech thing, we want you to do it." And he said, also, for some reason, you are great with authority. So that was a way to sort of, and then you would be asked, do you want to do this again? And sometimes, like Star Wars, I think I did two of them, and I didn't want to do a third one because I felt I probably did all the jokes I wanted to do about the franchise. So yeah, so you have a choice of passing on the movie, and sometimes I would see a movie and just say to Al Feldstein, the editor back then, "Al, if you're offering this movie up, put me on the list of because I want to get even with
Use it
those
as like a
people."
tool. The pen is mightier than the sword. And one of the big recent movies, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, about a fading star in late '60s Hollywood, Leonardo DiCaprio's character. On his wall, you see a cover of Mad Magazine that his character within a character that he was playing on the show, this cowboy show, was parodied. And obviously, the inclusion of that was to showcase that you're not nobody if you haven't been on the cover of Mad Magazine. Sort of like if you're a rock star, you're not a rock star if you haven't been on the cover of Rolling Stone. Did it feel that way, in the writers' room? Did it feel that way at the magazine, where you were these sort of kingmakers, where you sort of had this power with the magazine to anoint celebrities or movies, where if we're making fun
You
of your
know what?
movie, it's saying something about your movie.
We would. I remember Michael Fox on Johnny Carson. He said to Michael Fox, "When did you think I'm a star?" And he said, "When I saw Mad Magazine and saw that Mort Drucker had drawn me and my image was on the cover of Mad." Well, I was thrilled. He was thrilled by that. I was thrilled by that. Um, so, I mean, we were always thrilled when something good happened, and we were thrilled when Mad was on 60 Minutes. I've been pitching 60 Minutes for years because I knew somebody over there, and he said, "Oh, it needs to be some sort of a special thing." And I called up and I said, "Looking, next issue is 30 years without ads. Is that not something?" And he called back and he said, "Oh, you know what? They're very interested in that." And they came up and they shot the thing. And then Bill Gaines called me and they said, "Listen, uh, 60 Minutes just called." And they said they loved the piece so much. This is like May, that they're not going to run it now. They're going to run it as the fall opener of the series. What do you think about what they're saying? I said, they either love it or they hate it so much that by fall, they'll hope you have forgotten that they had done the piece. But they didn't. And they ran the piece. And Billy Gaines called me and he said, "Dick, this is the best thing that ever happened to Mad." He said, I think they picked up 22,000 subscribers from 60 Minutes. So uh, it was a thrill to work there because of people like you,
Hmm.
mostly men. The male skewed mostly toward men. And these days, young people don't know Mad, but if they see I always wear an Alfred pin.
Hmm.
I'm wearing it. I think I'm got my Alfred pin on now. If they recognize Alpha, they'll go, "Oh, Mad TV." They never say the magazine. Mad TV, they remember. So we were kind of local heroes. Thank God for the fans. I work on. I contribute to like 3 Mad websites because there are fans who like you. I should ask about your background because we sort of met through Facebook.
Hmm.
And so, are you a movie maker?
Yeah, yeah. I make movies, and I believe firmly in storytelling. I feel it's an incredible medium, and I was shaped by movies. I was shaped by books, and one of the things I was shaped by was Mad Magazine. I'll never forget the first issue I ever bought, and I'm not even that old. I'm a young guy, but it's already because everything has changed so much. Dating myself, it was a newsstand on Queens Boulevard, where you don't even have newsstands anymore. It was a newsstand on Queens Boulevard, and it wasn't a regular issue. It was a special Batman issue, where it was a compilation of all like the Batman articles
Yes,
going
yeah.
back to the '60s, stuff like that. And I knew Mad, from seeing in places, and Mad TV had just come out, and to actually, I never saw an issue in my life, you
Oh
know.
my gosh.
Yeah, so to see it right there in the newsstand, I told my mom, I was with her, I'm like, I got to get this issue. And that's when I started to discover what it actually is, because I only knew Alfred E. Newman and the logo and stuff that you see, the T-shirt stuff, I say, the stuff you'll always see on a T-shirt. And to start going through the magazine, and like anyone who's read Mad Magazine, I started subscribing immediately. You start picking out the stuff you like. You always look forward to the features every month. You start looking to, and at first it was always a mad look at, because I was you couldn't get me to read too much, so it was always the silent stuff, and that was sort of the gateway. And then as I got older, I started reading more of it, giving more of it a chance, and started to understand the different writers, the different cartoonists, getting into the history of it. And that was the thing about Mad Magazine, when you mentioned it, now where it sort of feels like all art, and I'm calling Mad Magazine art because I think it's art. Uh, all art feels sort of like this corporate produced entity. You know, you have all the superhero movies, you have, you know, Marvel, Disney, and that's not to knock that there has to be a space for everything, but it also didn't start that way. I mean, Marvel had a similar history to Mad Magazine, where it was just a bunch of people who got the opportunity to make up insane things, put it on paper, and people gave them money to consume it. But now it feels like you don't have that room anymore of people taking risks, of people taking chances, putting out something that might not be perfect. You know, you go through an issue of Mad Magazine, it never felt like the whole thing. It was, you know, an executive board sat there and said, okay, this has to be paint by colors, this whole thing, we have to figure it out. It felt like, you know, the way the early cast of Saturday Night Live would talk about it, where it's
Yeah, yeah.
where they say, you know, not every sketch is great, you know, but you put it together, you see what happens. And I think what resonates with audiences is that rebellious energy. It's that sort of, let's try it. And I think comedy is sort of the last bastion for artists right now, where, you know, it's where you're seeing the most risks taken. And you know, I love all genres, but that was the thing about Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine was humor, but it looked at all genres. And you know, I'm happy we have the chance to chat because I appreciate the magazine, but at the same time, you know, what's the next generation? There's always going to be something. Where's it sort of the next breakthrough? You know, even at the time you were making it, I'm so curious, what was the, you know, the nature, like, not just within the offices of Mad, but you had National Lampoon magazine coming out, you know, and there were sort of like shots fired where it was us versus them. And, you know, that's the way we see it as the audience, but what did it feel like behind
Well,
closed
you
doors?
know what? I think, I mean, I just kept writing and I thought, well, as long as we're going on, I think Cracked was the first time that there was like competition. But the thing about Cracked was, and Bill ended up suing Cracked, they would just steal Mad stuff. They started the fold up. I mean, if you did a fold up once as a joke, that would be something. But to do, and then they got the janitor, and he was something Smythe with an initial, and Bill sued them for no money. He just said, "Look, I don't want any money. Can you just do your own magazine? We're doing our stuff, but please create your own stuff because we don't like that you something we built and is a big part of our magazine." So maybe Billy worried about competition. I, I'm not sure he did. The thing about Mad was it was the only division of Time Warner that Mad that was the parent company. They owned DC Com. It was Time Warner, and then DC Comics, and then we were part of DC Comics. We were the only division that was not in corporate headquarters. And our offices were a shambles. And the sad thing is when Bill died, two executives from DC Comics came over and were very blunt and actually reduced one person to tears. The opening meeting was William M. Gaines put a wall between you and the corporate world. He's dead. The wall's coming down. These offices are a shambles. This looks like a high school newspaper. Well, that's a comp to us. That's a compliment. You're not going to have your own offices. You're going to move into a corporate building. You can't have this kind of crap on the walls. I mean, it was a terrible meeting. A terrible meeting. The only thing they said that I thought was at least something was we will not put our names on the mastheads as part of the usual gang of idiots. because this is new for us and we don't feel we can just put our names there. And that was the only thing they said during that entire meeting that I thought was decent.
That's
So,
funny. That's funny because you think about this stuff, where it's sort of like again with like the superhero stuff and all that, where it's sort of like these executives coming in and taking over. But to actually hear it go down that bluntly, it's you'd think that they wouldn't want it. If something works, why meddle with something if something works?
yeah.
So it's odd. And did you notice sort of a decline in energy? What around what that was the early 90s, I believe.
Yes. Well, what happened was they reneged a little bit. They said you can do whatever you want in in your own office, but close close your door when you leave your office. Um, and I didn't know. I don't think it was a big decline, but there were way more meetings, and the great thing about Bill is that he truly kept at Bill's memorial after he passed on. One of the vice presidents at Warner Brothers said that he had a meeting with Bill, and he said, "Bill, don't you think the Mad staff should come and be in corporate headquarters?" He said, Bill looked at me and said, "Do you want to move back with your parents?" And and he said, so I sort of got what he was saying. And once I was in an interview with Bill, and the interviewer said to Bill, Matt is very successful and you're a genius. And Bill said, no, I'm not a genius. It's the artists and writers who are the geniuses. But if it's something I've done to make Mad a success, it is to provide the writers and the artists an atmosphere in which to thrive. And I mean, I told that to another writer once, and they could hardly believe that someone would know that artists and writers need a certain atmosphere. They can't filling out a billion forms and having the phone ring 1,000 times and go to endless meetings. And Bill, that lady was right. Bill kept all of that stuff away from us. He did it. He went to any meeting there was. And he said to me, I said, there are a lot of meetings. He said, you know what a meeting is at Warner Brothers? I go over there once a year. I bring my profit sheet. If the profit sheet for this year is more money than last year, they go, okay, see you next year. He said, so that's all I have to do. I just have to make sure we make more money every year for them to be off our back. And, God bless him for that.
Yeah, and the result is, I mean, there's not one piece of television or movie that takes place, whether it's the 70s or something, that 70s show, someone has a Mad magazine. It sort of brings you to a place in time. And it's interesting because I get to see it from my point of view, audiences get to see it from their point of view, but you sort of got to live it. And, and at the time, did you appreciate the fact that it's sort of like, summer never ended? The
Yeah,
school bell
you know,
rang and you just got to live summer.
in a way, there were two instances. One was I was a huge fan of Sid Caesar. You know Sid Caesar? And,
Yeah,
and yeah,
yeah.
okay. And his show of shows. And I was out in LA working on a Goodson Tubman game show, and Sid Caesar was appearing as part of a musical in their whatever their section's called, their Broadway. And I went to the box office, and I said, "Listen, I'm just in town for a couple of days. Is there any chance of getting a seat anywhere because I'm a big Sid Caesar fan. And the guy said, he said, there's nothing anywhere. And I said, oh my God. I said, he inspired me to work for Mad. And the guy said, you work for Mad? And I said, yeah. And I had my pocket a Mad card. And he goes, oh my God, I know you work. Um, is a house seat okay?
You felt like a rock star, right?
I know. I said, are you kidding me? He said, no. I said, yes. And I take out my wallet and he says, no, this is my treat for all the years of enjoyment you and Matt have given me. I mean, that was one of the most incredible things. And the other one was giving my boarding pass in on a flight, and the guy, oh, I had my Mad pin on. And he says, "Oh, you got a Mad pin?" I said, "Yeah, I work for Mad. What do you do?" "I write a lot of the movie satires." He goes, "Hang on a minute." He goes, "No, no, 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 no. I want you to be in first class." He said, "No, no, no." He said, "Oh, there is a seat in first." This is before they were frequent flyer miles and all that. He just upgraded me. And so those were two times where I thought, holy cow, there are some people, and not unlike yourself, and the people who run the websites. There's a guy, Doug Guilford, runs this incredible mad site called Mad Cover Site. I don't know if you know it. It is the
Hmm.
contents of every issue of Mad, every special. We stopped. We used to have bound issues at Mad, and someone go, "Will someone go find out what issue it was where someone did a thing on a health club? Maybe it was Larry Siegel, Dick. Maybe you wrote it." We used to have to go through the actual books. Doug digitized everything. It's nothing to do with the Mad, but what an astounding fan. So anyway, I hope
Yeah.
I'm not
No, no,
ranting
no,
on too
no.
much yet, right?
No, because again, it's sort of, it becomes this time capsule of a period. And, just like Mad Magazine doesn't get published new issues anymore, the satires were important, but just as important were the satires, were the movies being satired. And we're sort of living in an age now where, once in a while you see a film pop up that has some sort of cultural importance, but for the most part, movies don't carry that same sort of zeitgeist that they used to in the past. Where, when Pulp Fiction released, every movie was trying to look like Pulp Fiction. Jurassic Park, Titanic, in the 80s, you knew it was Schwarzenegger and Stallone. It was sort of this zeitgeist
Yeah,
that
no,
influenced how
yeah.
people dressed. We were talking before this about, The Big Lebowski, how all of a sudden people are drinking White Russians and wearing robes because it became cool, where society appreciates a movie so much, they sort of want to make it their own style, and every day becomes Halloween. But in an era where, that's not really the case, how would, if you're going about trying to create a satire of something that isn't as culturally big as it was when you were doing it back in the day, how would you go about picking where to pull humor from? Because something has to have some sort of importance for it to be worth making jokes about in the first place.
Yeah, I guess you would just see how much press something is getting. And I mean, several people have asked me saying, "Oh, aren't you sorry Man's not around so you could do a takeoff on the Barbie movie?" I wouldn't want to. Have you seen that, by the way?
I have not yet.
Okay. I think it is a freaking astounding movie. And it's Greta and Noah. I think Greta, I forgot her last name.
Greta
Uh,
Gerwig.
who wrote it and produced it with her husband partner
Hmm.
Noah.
Hmm.
How knowing I've also done some corporate scripts, knowing what it's like to work for a corporation. I have no idea how that movie got made because there's a lot of stuff that's not flattering to Mattel. Um, but it's so clever and so funny, and it's already past $1 billion. But yet, I there's no satire to be done. I think it's so funny and so original that I wouldn't want to do it. And it was very hard. Every once in a while, John would say, "Can you do a satire of Frasier?" Or it's very difficult, especially if the show is funny.
Hmm.
Um, I used to work for Goodson Todd and did a lot of game shows, and we had Robert Alder um, on I think To Tell the Truth. And backstage, he said, "You know, you work for Mad, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, Can I complain about something?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, I think they were grossly unfair to MASH in their satire." Um, and I said, I didn't write it, but as a writer, let me just tell you this. First of all, we only satirized Nielsen Top 10. Okay. And so that already signifies that we know it's a mega hit. And I said, the problem is when you're satirizing a satire, it's very difficult. And I said, you almost make up problems that don't exist and then make fun of them just to fill the pages. And I said, it is no reflection on the show because the people at Mad love the show. And he said, "Well, thank you." He said, "I am so glad I spoke to you. I was carrying this grudge, but now I sort of understand that you have to sort of poke fun where there isn't a problem."
Yeah. It's interesting
To
how some people sort of carry it as a badge of honor to be made fun of in
Yes,
Mad Magazine, and some people are legitimately upset about it, as if,
yes,
your goal was to like point out what you don't like about society. And
yes, yes. There was a show on Nickelodeon called Double Dare.
hmm.
Oh, you know of it?
Yeah, yeah.
Mark Summers, I
Hmm.
think. Okay. And I did a show on Nickelodeon, a crazy show called You Want It, You Got It. Um, and Mark calls me and he goes, "Oh, I heard through the grapevine you're doing a satire of my show." I said, "I am." And he said, When it's done, can I get a copy?" I said, "You can, but Mark, I am not complimentary." He said, That's okay. That's okay." So when the proofs came back, I sent him a copy. And 2 days later, Dick, Mark Summers on the phone for I go, "Oh, God. Now he's going to realize how mean I was." And he said, "Dick," I said, "Yeah, what?" He said, "Can I show this on the air?" I said, You're not upset?" He goes, "Upset? 5 pages of me and Mad? What are you kidding me? I want to promote it."
That's cool. He got it. He understood what
Yes,
it sort of
yes.
was. It's like I said, it's like if you're a musician, you want to be, or at least you wanted to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. Mad Magazine was sort of this badge of honor. You mentioned working on TV shows. That I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but I did want to touch upon your have a great story about the Match Game, where you were working on the Match Game and it was canceled. I mean, it was pretty
Yeah,
much canceled.
yeah,
And
yeah.
what happened?
So the match game, the original match game was um, name a president who appears on money, name a red flower, name something to do with an egg, and it was a year contract. And 10 months in, Mark Goodson called me in and he said, "Listen, NBC is not picking up the option, so you can start looking for work. I know you have 2 months of shows." And then over the weekend, I'm thinking, I'm working for Mad. There should be a way to do something crazy here. So I wrote a bunch of questions, the very first match game question ever. And I went into Goodson. I said, "How about instead of the president on money, how about Mary like to pour gravy on John's blank?" So Goodson laughs and he goes, "Well, what will they say?" I said, "They're going to laugh like you did. And then they're going to say meatloaf, mashed potatoes." And he said, "Well, it's canceled. They can't cancel it twice. Do what you want." So I started writing those, and a month in, Goodson said, "Hey, they picked it up for another year." And he said, "As long as there's a match game, you'll have a job." So I worked there for 18 years. Um,
That's incredible. And it's something you said, they can't cancel us twice. Or
so in other words,
if they wanted to, they couldn't have tried it. But it's the fact where they sort of just let the artist know, and you could have failed. you
Yeah,
could have
no,
made a joke, it would
absolutely.
have failed.
Yes, and it's a little off the air, but evidently the audience just loved it. I mean, the fact that it still is on Buzzer and Game Show Network, it
I mean,
just worked.
it sort of set the trend in general when you look at game shows. It's all about sort of the double entendres, and creating, these moments of humor, even with Family Matter, not Family Matters, Family
Family Feud.
Feud.
Yeah.
Family Feud. I mean, that's, now that everything sort of transitioned into the digital age and YouTube, it's all about, what's that one question, what's that one moment on a game show that's, creating humor in that sort of way that you can put into a 2-minute clip on YouTube. And it sort of goes back to what you did at that time. And it was really just, well, again, that whole philosophy was they can't cancel us twice, so let's just try
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank God that Goodson, had that, he figured it can't hurt. I laughed. Maybe the audience will laugh. So,
When everything transitioned, you know, sort of to the digital, the streaming age,
yeah.
and away from that, and again, this is something we talked about before, where before we started this episode, we were talking about how you will never have as many eyes watching one thing on TV, like when the MASH finale, the Seinfeld finale, Cheers finale, just episodes. It was CBS, NBC, ABC, and then Fox came in the late '80s, and PBS was this sort of, whatever else is on. And people, you had the nation for the most part watching the same stuff. Now there's so many channels, so much everything. Even if you created the greatest show of all time, the new version of Seinfeld, the new comedy version of Seinfeld, it could never be Seinfeld because you just can't get that many eyes on it. So,
Yeah, that's correct. It, there's too many things to see, and no matter how nichey your sense of humor is, you can find something that can address it. But what do we have? 9 channels? I don't know. When you were a kid, you probably had 30 channels, right? When I
well, we
was,
started off with just regular TV. I
oh, you
remember,
did. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so does Fox. And then we started to get cable, but cable didn't really have shows. It was only like later on that you started to get Oz and Sopranos
Yes.
starting off that
Yes,
revolution.
cable did not do original stuff.
Shows, yeah, it
Yeah.
was it was
Yeah. I don't
TV.
even Netflix didn't they? I think Netflix just showed other
Yeah,
people's movies,
yeah,
and then they started with, "Well, let's produce our own movies." Yeah,
yeah.
you're right. There's just too many things. And the other thing is, you'll watch a TikTok video and then learn that it has 150 million views. You have no idea who those people were. You'll never hear of them again. It's just kind of astounding that something can be huge, but just to a narrow fan base. I'm not quite sure what I'm even saying here,
Yeah.
but it goes back to no matter how huge, well, maybe Barbie passing a billion, I think it's a billion point two in like 3 weeks is a phenomenon.
Mhm.
But uh, that's not going to happen often.
No, but I personally am an optimist. I think the pendulum swings. It won't look the same, but just like they're
Something will
rebooting
happen.
everything,
Okay.
yeah, there'll be a Mad reboot. In 10 years, they'll do a Mad reboot. It won't look anything like Mad. It'll be run by the executives who said, we're you're gonna have to stay behind your closed doors. But but there's always going to be something. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat and tell these stories, and thank you for all the work you did. And know that the influence is sort of like this disease. It gets into people and then it makes them think, I can do it, I want to do it. And that's a good thing. More people trying to recreate what they love, is how we do get in this whole swamp of just content, how we get something that's art. And I don't know if at the time you all appreciated, but Mad Magazine is this sort of time capsule piece of art.
Well, thank you, and also thank you for being a fan because every once in a while, I'll do a show and someone would say, "What's that goofy guy? Sometimes he's on the cover." They have,
Alfred E. Newman.
yeah,
That's Alfred E. Newman.
it's like someone told them call this guy, and they have no idea what Mad is, and they're trying to fake it. I mean,
They
you
got
know
him.
your
They
stuff,
got him off a
and
postcard, I believe, because I have the books, the history of
yeah,
Mad and all that, and
from a dentist dad, a painless
yeah,
dentist dad.
yeah. Thank you
So
so much.
thank you for being a fan and having intelligent questions.
Thank you.